I watched Freddy vs. Jason, and first off, let's be clear. This is very much a corporate crossover cash grab. That said, this movie has absolutely no business working as well as it occasionally does. And I think one of the reasons is because Jason, at his core, is an abused child, and Freddy, at his core, is a child abuser. And somehow the CEO stumbled into pairing the two most famous slashers that actually have some great thematic contrast, and they work surprisingly well in a fight. Is the logic behind the mashup flimsy? Like balsa wood. Hobby Lobby birdhouse levels of flimsy. Freddy's power has waned because no one knows who he is anymore, so to remind people who he is and regain his power, he resurrects Jason to go kill for him. So somehow resurrecting an undead murder revenant is the easier option than just showing up in someone's dreams? Okay. The nightmare demon has outsourced his job. So the first thing I notice after coming off a really long stretch of the Friday the 13th movie is that this movie has money behind it. They upgraded from camp counselors with a camera to actual production values. It's polished, it's fancy looking, the kills are explicit in a way that Friday the 13th usually wasn't allowed to be. But despite Jason being in the title, this still feels like a Freddy movie for most of its runtime. So Freddy pretends to be Jason's mom, and directs him to go kill. And Jason is a good son and listens to his mama, so he goes and kills. We're going to ignore locations here, though. Jason might be a Jersey boy, but apparently Crystal Lake is now a 20-minute walk from Elm Street. Don't question it. We have Lori, played by definitely not Brittany Murphy somehow, and her friend group. Generic white guy number one and DLC generic white guy numbers two get killed off pretty darn quickly to start with. The druggy friend goes next, and everyone starts to whisper, maybe Freddy's back. And one very well placed, that goalie sure was pissed off about something. We get an amazing scene in a cornfield that works way better than it should. Somebody on set looked at the fire budget and said, we are using every penny. Jason gets set on fire, and it's such a delight to watch. It's Jason! Setting him on fire doesn't affect him, but now the machete is flaming as it cuts you in half. And this sort of leads into one of those contrasts that, again, works better than it should. In Pokemon terms, Jason is weak to water and Freddy is weak to fire. Jason Ritter and Brendan Fletcher are in an asylum somewhere nearby, and they see a news report about the murders at Laurie's house. They apparently know her and immediately recognize her, and we get information throughout the movie that implies there was a Freddy incident that they were all involved in, so they know Freddy's involved. Really, the central thesis of this movie is just somehow this is Freddy's fault. So Jason Ritter and Brendan Fletcher escape the asylum and rush to warn Laurie, who doesn't really seem to remember what happened before. No one really does. Hmm. And then we get this whole subplot where the adults have all worked to effectively erase Freddy from social consciousness, and it's actually a kind of interesting premise. They solved the Freddy problem, which immediately creates an entirely different kind of horror movie. They did all this work to stop him, and it succeeded, but the gaps left behind create curiosity and distrust, and they can't explain themselves without undoing all of their work and releasing Freddy once again. There's a whole ward at the hospital hidden away full of people that they couldn't effectively drug the memories out of. They've all fallen into comas from overuse of anti dream drugs. Now, Lori and her friends are all horrified by this discovery, but honestly, I'm siding with the adults here. I'm sorry. I'm having a real hard time judging the ethics of medically induced comas when the alternative is nightmare serial killer demon. Meanwhile, Freddy is getting annoyed because his genius plan isn't working as well as he would have liked. Freddy is furious because Jason has somehow stolen all the credit for the kills, despite literally being the one doing the killing. Freddy's master plan hinged on Jason understanding the concept of just enough murder. He delegated, that was his mistake. But at this point, Freddy's grown strong enough to start murdering on his own and possessing people, and we get one of the most aggressively 2000 CGI sequences ever committed to film. There is a bold Alice in Wonderland reference with a Freddy pillar and a hookah, and now he wants to stop Jason. Of course he does. And this is where Jason figures out, and honestly, Jason figuring anything out feels a little bit like a stretch. But Jason figures out that's not his mom talking to him. Because Pamela Voorhees would never yell at her special little boy like that, and Jason may have the IQ of damp plywood, but he knows that's not his mama. But Freddy has temporarily pranked Jason, so he's able to mess him up pretty good in Dream World. Meanwhile, in reality, Laurie immediately makes the only rational decision in this movie: Team Jason! Well, at least Jason is tangible and has a territory he might feasibly stay in. So she and the friend group are lugging this absolute unit of murder back to Camp Crystal Lake in an attempt to give Jason home court advantage. And then we get another thing that I think the filmmakers absolutely nailed. Ken Kurtzinger plays Jason, and he is enormous. Every shot we get of him, where there is a size comparison between him and other people, is ridiculous. But it's great visual language. Freddy is small and slim and agile and moves with the energy of a rat terrier with ADHD, while Jason lumbers. He's slow because he doesn't need to be fast. He is inevitable. And Freddy is constantly quipping and talking and reminding absolutely everybody that it is the early 2000s and he can be edgy. And Jason contributes to the conversation in the way only an undead homicide machine can, staring blankly. We get some sympathetic background on Jason, and I'm sold. I already liked him better, and now I just want to give that little drowned boy a hug. And we finally get to see what we all came to see: the fight of the century! Laurie does the old go into the dream world and bring Freddy back into the real world bit. So now the cabin is on fire, Freddy is in the real world, and Jason is pissed. He is flinging Freddy around like a rag doll, and Freddy discovers, much to his disappointment, that Jason has roughly the same structural integrity of reinforced concrete. The fight becomes less who's stronger and more who can survive the most damage. And Jason's answer is just always yes. Freddy cuts off Jason's fingers and takes his machete. And Jason's response to that is to stab him with his own knife glove. It's a good contrast, but really, this is the only way the fight could have ever ended. Mutual destruction between two unstoppable forces. Uh, neither one was ever going to come out on top. They cancel each other out. And Jason is returned to his lake, and Freddy is returned to mincemeat. But neither of those outcomes really ends either force. They just stop them. For now. This movie is way more polished than I've been used to throughout the Friday the 13th series, and the kills all feel much more like something you'd see in an Elm Street movie. But despite the obvious corporate direction, some things genuinely work, more than you would expect. Jason and Freddy have some really interesting contrasts, and they make more sense the longer you think about them. The adults in the background were actually doing things correctly. The idea of Jason pulling power from people believing in him has always been one of the more interesting horror concepts in slasher movies. And this movie definitely ooh-woos Jason a little bit, and clearly I have a type. One of my favorite Leatherfaces is Jed from 3D, and he's pretty dang ooh-woo himself. Which really just brings us back to the main thesis of this movie. Let Jason have his nap. He didn't ask for any of this, and somehow it is all Freddy's fault.